my turn to welcome each one of you. Delighted really to have you here to this 8th IRLA World Congress. I would like to preface what I'm going to say by emphasizing the fact that everything that is going to be happening during these 3 days together will be about promoting life, will be about making this world a better place for millions. IRLA is committed to this very task, to make this world a better place where people can experience freedom, freedom of conscience, freedom of thought, freedom of religion. IRLA was chartered in 1893. In a very particular context, 19th century America, where some people were tempted to impose their religious views to other people. IRLA was chartered to guarantee for all freedom of religion or belief, freedom to choose what to believe or what not to believe. IRLA has actually been participating in public debates and discourse in various ways. May I just ask that they forward the slides, please? Thank you. Next one. Okay. We do so by engaging in international forums or fora on religious freedom and peace, and this was the case in Moscow a few years ago. We also participate in relationship building, creating networks to advance the cause of religious freedom. IRLA is also involved in capacity building, helping people be better equipped to understand what religious liberty is, its meaning, its scope in particular. IRLA, of course, organizes events and initiatives, and this, of course, is one of them, IRLA World Congress. But there are also meetings of experts. Interestingly, next week we will be having our meeting of experts at Princeton University in New Jersey. Every year we engage the academic world. We've been in Sydney, Australia, Toronto, usually engaging not only law schools, but also theological faculties, reflecting in order to help develop a global culture of religious liberty. Of course, even at a bigger scale, a culture of human rights. IRLA also supports initiatives of affiliates, several organizations that we work with. You just have a few samples here, as I don't know if they could just continue to roll the slides. The G20 Interfaith Summit in Beijing, China, for example, was one of them. We engaged the UN, where I was invited to make a presentation on religious freedom and human sexuality, for example. This was with the previous UN Special Rapporteur, Heiner Bielefeld. Several of these initiatives are really geared towards helping people embrace our humanity everywhere in the world. I mentioned earlier relationship building with international institutions, not only the UN, but here the African Union, for example, Addis Ababa. We also have protocol visits. Here it was the governor of Mexico. Here we have my associate, Nelu Burcha, meeting with the UN Special Rapporteur. He is our official liaison. We have here Attorney Dwayne Leslie. He is our liaison with Washington, the US government in particular. I mentioned earlier the capacity building. We help all over the world, and here I have, we were invited to partner at USTE, and I see here Professor Rosa Maria Martinez de Codes sitting here. She facilitated those. Bucharest University, we also now engage in curriculum development in several universities so that we may help develop a culture of human rights in particular and religious freedom. And this was last year where we were hosted at Harvard Divinity School, again engaging the academic world. You can see here, there's a breadth of activities whereby we would like to have religious freedom integrated. And as I will mention a little later, religious freedom is really at the heart of what it means to be human. But I will develop a little more on that a little later. Thank you very much for this. Now, I would like to focus on what is really very dear to my heart. And the reason why I'm saying this, we would like to take a few moments to honor a person who functioned as IRLA president. I am talking here about Ambassador Bob Seipel. There are people who have proven that they are gifts to the whole human family. They make no difference whatsoever among people. They are committed to serve all. And Ambassador Seipel is one of those people. Bob Seipel is an ambassador, global leader, and educator. He has spent the last 3 decades literally fashioning humanitarian solutions that endure. His international travels have been as extensive as the experiences and contacts he developed through years of global involvement. Vulnerable lives lived out in difficult places have proven the personal challenge for Seipel's work. He was born in New Jersey in 1942, and by the time he entered college, his natural leadership ability was clearly apparent. As a student at Brown University in Rhode Island, he was class president for 4 years, and he captained the football team back then. From 1966 to 1969, Seipel was in the Marine Corps, serving part of the time as a navigator aboard an intruder jet. He earned the Distinguished Flying Cross and other medals after flying 300 missions over Vietnam at the time. This experience motivated him to become an outspoken advocate for the healing of US-Vietnam relations. He returned from Vietnam to his alma mater, Brown University, in 1971 as athletic director and admissions officer. In the 1980s, he actually became president of Eastern College, now known as Eastern University, in St. David's, Pennsylvania, and Eastern Baptist Theological Seminary. In 1986, at the age of 44, he became the youngest ever president of the international humanitarian organization, World Vision. He began traveling the world, meeting and mingling with people whose lives had been blighted by poverty, natural disasters, and conflicts. Seipel spent the next 11 years as president of World Vision, which is actually the world's largest privately funded relief and development agency. In that capacity, he increased the organization's income base from 145 million to over 350 million. At his departure, World Vision was helping more than 70 million people over 100 countries. That was the kind of involvement that Ambassador Seipel was engaged in. In 1999, President Bill Clinton invited Ambassador Seipel to serve as the first United States ambassador at large for international religious freedom from 1999, by the way, to 2001. After leaving this position, he founded the Institute for Global Engagement, an organization that reached out to both marginalized religious minorities and their governments and seek to promote religious freedom and political stability. We were honored to invite Ambassador Seipel to serve as president of IRLA, our organization. He served with distinction and competent leadership. We are truly grateful for him having blessed us with his friendship, insights, and work to make this world a better place for millions. And this is the reason why we have made a plaque and also an award of honor to Ambassador Seipel. He could not be with us today, regrettably. He had some mission, I can say, at his house, and we are with him with that. I visited with him not long ago, and I will be happy to bring to him in about a week the awards that we have prepared to honor him, because he really is one of those gifts that I believe is given to us to make this world a better place. Thank you.
So, Ambassador Seipel, we've just heard a little bit about the highlights of your work and your service over the past few decades. I'm wondering, through that time, have there been any experiences that have really shaped your worldview, that have sort of prodded you along the path that you've ultimately taken?
Well, all these experiences have a face. And if I've done nothing else in my life, I've tried to put a face on the problems. And in terms of this issue and all of its ramifications, I learned more from a young woman, 18-year-old Mary in Lebanon, about religious freedom and reconciliation than I probably learned from anyone.
Right.
In meeting with her, she was part of that terrible civil war in Lebanon that was at least partly a religious conflict. And there came a day when someone from another tribe, another religion, another ethnicity came in, shooting up everybody. And Mary ran with everybody, fell to the ground, and before she could get up, someone put a gun to her head and said, "Deny the cross or die." Now, this is an 18-year-old. This is coercion, the worst kind of coercion. This is the worst of religion. And in that instance, the best of her faith came through. She said, "I was born a Christian, I'll die a Christian." Well, he pulled the trigger, and instantly Mary was a quadriplegic. When I met Mary, she's in an institution, she's strapped to a wheelchair. I mean, everything's been taken away from her, except her religious freedom. And for Mary, that was enough. And I said to her, "Mary, how do you feel about this man who tried to take your life?" I mean, it was a miracle that she was still alive. And she said, "I've forgiven him." I said, "Mary, how in the world could you forgive him?" She said, "Well, that's what God did for me. I could do no other." You know, Miroslav Volf was supposed to speak here. My favorite theologian once said, what God has done, man must do. The Apostle Paul said it a little bit more eloquently, but with a few more words as well. We are now agents of reconciliation. So there's coercion, and coercion that's overcome by positive faith. And that positive faith leads and puts a new face on this whole religious freedom issue, the reconciliation that comes. Now, for the Christian, reconciliation is the heart of our gospel. But this is, I think, the purpose of this Congress, the theme of this Congress. How do you deal with people with deep differences?
Yeah.
Well, you have to respect them. You have to know them. You can't respect somebody you don't know. And that takes a lot of work, and it's not easy. It's not easy. This is a woman in a wheelchair for the rest of her life. But also when it happens, it leaves an impression. So for me, I've got a picture of Mary in my office downstairs. And I will always have a picture of Mary on my desk. She's taught me more about this. This was a game changer for Seipel.
Now, okay, so you had this experience and you had this, this new understanding, I guess, of the importance of religious freedom. Then as you took up the office of the United States Ambassador at Large, the first Ambassador at Large for international religious freedom, how did you then take that and try to translate it into practice during your tenure there?
Well, you're talking to a whole different cast of characters.
Right.
With World Vision, it was always from the ground up. You're down in the gutter in some respects, but you're working through local things, churches and so on. And when I got into the government, I was, of course, working more top down. You got picked up at airports. You got driven around, and all those kind of things that come with that. But what we tried to do is let people know, let countries know, China, Saudi Arabia, etc., that it was in their best interest. I wasn't trying to change their worldview. I wasn't trying to give them a new set of ethics. I wanted to appeal to their pragmatism. This is in your best interest to treat people well. And I thought we made considerable progress. Now, there's a long, long way to go.
Yeah.
And it's been a long time coming. But I think if we can, again, keep our perspective on the face of this issue, the Marys of the world, we can communicate that to anybody in any country, in any context.
Ambassador Seipel, we are so thankful for your contributions and your service through so many years, and we're thankful that you've spoken to us here at the World Congress.
Sorry I'm not there, but I'm glad I could speak through you.
Thank you.
It is just fitting at the beginning of this World Congress, the first session, with the theme Religious Freedom and Hope for Peaceful Coexistence, that we start emphasizing the role of religious freedom. What is it? So I'm going to briefly talk about the pivotal position of religious freedom for peaceful coexistence. The reason for our commitment to promote religious freedom is the following. One, religious freedom is actually the expression, the intimate expression, or the most intimate expression of human disposition, and I'm talking about human conscience in particular. A person loses his or hers or her most distinctive characteristic when one's conscience is silenced, not allowed to operate, when in fact it is violated. Violence against a person in order to force that person to go against his or her conscience negates their humanity. Slavery was and is so despicable precisely because of the suppression of the conscience of the enslaved person. Without a functioning and active conscience, the sense of right and wrong escapes human responsibility. So the precondition for the flourishing of any freedom is in fact freedom of conscience and, of course, freedom of religion or belief. The need for advocacy, promotion, or defense of rights starts with freedom of conscience, the inner voice that deserves to be voiced. Religious freedom is an antidote against totalitarian regimes. It is a deterrent against subjugation of populations, ethnic cleansing, and genocide. This is why it is so important. It goes against criminalizing others based on their difference. Religious liberty or religious freedom or freedom of religion or belief militates against discrimination based on differences in belief. It favors self-determination and respect of other people's religious and philosophical choices and identities. For IRLA leadership and membership, religious liberty is part of a humanizing mission. It's more than just freedom to worship or not to worship. It's part of a bigger project. That's why we're so passionate about it. It is part of being human and humane, to respect other people's freedom, integrity, and dignity. Being human and humane, I can even say, is to treat other people as human beings in solidarity to all their rights, right to life, liberty, justice, and peace. So freedom of religion then means freedom from persecution, freedom from being coerced, freedom from being forced to remain in a given religion, ideology, worldview, or even cultural allegiance. More fundamentally, religious freedom is immunity from coercion in matters of conscience. It is immunity from being forced to believe or not to believe. Forcing someone to believe or not to believe is a denial of that person's humanity, as mentioned. This is not just a private matter. It involves the whole human family. This is the reason why the international community and their representatives in international organizations have their say about freedom of religion or belief. This is obvious in the declarations of the United Nations, the Organization of American States, the African Union, the Organization of Asian Nations, and other organizations. This was mentioned earlier by Ambassador Ney about Article 18 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Everyone has the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. This right includes freedom to change his religion or belief, and freedom either alone or in community with others, and in public or private, to manifest his or her his religion or belief in teaching, practice, worship, and observance. I will take just a few minutes to highlight the context of that declaration. On December 10, 1948, high-level representatives of nations gathered to ratify the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And this happened after the devastating impact of World War I and II, with 16 million and 60 million casualties, respectively. World War I, 16 million deaths. World War II, 60 million deaths. The world was then faced with the critical choice: continue to wage war, devastating wars, or to build peace. Nations decided to build peace. Of course, the League of Nations first, and then the UN, the United Nations. They agree on 3 pillars. The first pillar of the UN is peace and security. So instead of waging wars, they decide to build peace. First pillar, peace and security. But they soon realize you cannot have peace and security without justice and development, second pillar. and no possibility to have justice and development without the third pillar, which is human rights. And human rights, not just a general concept, but specifically as individual liberty, personal equality, and then life in dignity. This is a consensus that nations came to. But besides the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, key UN documents began to emerge. Political consultations led to several covenants, treaties, declarations, specifically what is now known as the 9 core international human rights treaties, which was signed after World War II. Several organizations since then committed themselves to working to build peace, overcome hostility, antagonism, conflicts, and wars. What the world is in need of is the development of a culture of respect for the right to believe or not to believe, religious freedom or freedom of religion or belief in the dignity of difference, basically. As I mentioned at the introduction, to promote freedoms is really part of promoting life, because freedom is the genuinely intrinsic characteristic of life. A life worth living is a life of freedom. Moreover, life is incontrovertibly associated with dignity, and consequently, all human beings should be treated with respect, their rights protected. This mandate, interestingly, is one of the functions of states and governments when they function well. A tangible way to respect people is to respect their conscience. As I mentioned earlier, an inner sanctuary or sanctum where decisions are made which express one's deepest humanity and identity. So freedom of religion or belief is instrumental, inevitably, in achieving peace in the international community by means of upholding the value of conscience. Religious liberty, as is increasingly evident in every part of the world, is a complex concept, irreducible, though, to a mere freedom to believe or not to believe, to worship or not to worship. Religious freedom is uniquely positioned among all fundamental freedoms. It is a value which undergirds all the other freedoms. In fact, it is central to them. Now, the interconnectedness of all human rights has been acknowledged. Clearly, in the Vienna Declaration, 1993, it was stated, all human rights are universal, interrelated, interdependent, and indivisible. The same can be said about all freedom, all freedoms. And religious freedom presupposes equality. It is an expression of justice. It is an inalienable right, the violation of which erodes chances for peaceful coexistence. Not only are all rights universal, interdependent, and indivisible, all freedom equally, or as well, are universal, interdependent, and indivisible. But why is religious freedom so important? Why is IRLA investing personnel, resources, time to focus on this particular value? You know, religious freedom can be compared to a multifaceted trajectory upstream and downstream. It presupposes freedom of thought, freedom of conscience, freedom of choice, freedom of expression. Religious freedom has accurately been designated as a compound freedom in itself. It translates into freedom of assembly, without which it will be relegated to the private sphere. So freedom of religion includes the right to own property also, devoted to celebrate what one cherishes most. This freedom means the right to use signs and symbols in time or space. It allows basically enactments of beliefs through rites, rituals, commemorations of valued past events, or anticipations of the future, expressions of hope for a better future. In essence, religious freedom is the right to profess, to practice, to propagate one's belief without restriction or coercion or intimidation. It is also the right to change one's belief. It is the inalienable prerogative to live according to the dictates of one's most intimate freedom, freedom of conscience. So freedom of religion is regulated, of course, by the responsibility not to impinge upon other people's freedoms, and more positively, by the awareness of the infinite dignity and worth of all other human beings. There is a moral dimension to freedom of religion or belief, and this is because of its, again, intimate connection to human conscience, where ethical decisions are made. Conscience characterizes us, who we are as human beings, moral beings capable of showing deep solidarity with all members of the human family. Someone wrote, religious freedom is the sine qua non of living freely. You may allow me to vote, own property, and associate freely in the public square in every other way, but if you do not permit me to speak or act on those beliefs about ultimate reality that define who I am and why I am on this earth, then the other freedoms mean little. In a very real sense, then, all human freedoms depend on the freedom of religion. As such, religious freedom is the prerequisite for and the guardian of all other freedoms. This has been said by Thomas Farr. The right to self-determination of one's deepest identity is one of the most valuable and legitimate individual and collective aspirations of the human family. And this explains the reason why we are committed to promote this universal human right and encourage governments everywhere to protect it. This right is inscribed, as mentioned earlier, in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. But freedom of religion or belief must be fully integrated into national and international conversations, policy making, and decisions as to mechanism of protection of this fundamental right. Most reflections focus on the right aspect when we hear freedom of religion, the legislative, legal dimensions of religious freedom, but there is a need to emphasize the human aspect, and this involves anthropological, theological, and existential perspectives as well. Peace can only coexist, or people can only coexist in peace, rather, where freedoms flourish. And key among these is religious freedom. It is part of a global endeavor to humanize the world, to help people assume their destiny of being decent citizens, respecting the common good and the rights of every person. Religions are purposed to promote life, and the work of reconciliation, as Ambassador Seipel mentioned, is an indispensable component of this promotion of life. The whole human family ought to enjoy the right to life. So we can say then that religious freedom, which is also freedom not to believe or to belong to any given religious organization, allows everyone the opportunity to be an influence also in the political processes and policy making without succumbing to the temptation of translating personal beliefs into national or universal policies. Freedom of religion or belief secures for everyone a place at the table, so to speak, and a voice in the conversation and decision-making processes. Religious freedom, as mentioned, is an antidote to state or religious totalitarianism. Professor Wolf will be talking about that aspect, religious totalitarianism. Freedom of religion or beliefs creates the condition for partnership between state agencies and faith-based organizations. As a matter of fact, there can be no democracy without freedom of religion or belief. The concept of separation of church and state and that of laicite as the political model of not privileging any given religion or faith-based organization has functioned as an antidote against religious totalitarianism. Religious dimension and discourse belong to the table of peoples and nations. However, it should not stifle the voice of non-religious people. Someone said that the kingdom of God is not of this world. There is no such thing as a Christian nation or a Muslim nation or a Buddhist or a Hindu without stifling dissenting voices. To promote or defend religious freedom is to be part of a global conversation. Yes, it has become a very complex endeavor. It involves not only legal or legislative matters, but requires the factoring in of other domains of human sciences and activities, social sciences, economy, administration, psychology, and philosophy, to name but a few, without neglecting the competence needed in religious and philosophical studies. This Congress is meant to be a harvest of various needed contributions which highlight the need for religious freedom for peaceful coexistence among diverse and different people of goodwill. One last dimension of religious freedom. Religious freedom is part of a lifestyle. When people embrace religious freedom, they become benevolent towards others. They are careful not to violate people's integrity or dignity. When religious freedom is embraced, we give up violence and give up being a threat to other people. So that's why there's more to religious freedom than meets the eye. And we at IRLA are committed to try to make this world a more peaceful place, whereby people can start embracing everybody's humanity, regardless of other people's choices. Of course, as long as they are not harmful to other people. So there's more to religious freedom, again, that meets the eye. But we hope that your contributions, each one of you, not only those who will be speaking, but also those who will be interacting, and then conversations, even off sessions, will contribute to bring, allow me to say, almost an offering to make us better people towards one another. Thank you very much. Just before, I would like to do two things before I ask Attorney Leslie to come. I would like to just, first of all, mention that we have a new president at IRLA. Ambassador Bob Seipel was the previous president, so now we have Ambassador Ney. I don't know many people of European descent who speak Chinese, right? I don't think you do. And he does, right? We are delighted to have you as the new leader for the new president for IRLA. We thank you very much for that. They are dignitaries who have been introduced by my friend, Attorney Orland Johnson, and I would like to single out two of them. There are two dignitaries that I would like to now introduce to you, because the first one actually started this journey of IRLA. I mean, he didn't start it, but he was the one who really took IRLA to another level. And his name is Dr. Bert Beach. And I would like him to stand, because I can see him. Could you please stand? Dr. Beach, He's turning as if... Dr. Beach, could you please stand? All right. I don't think he knows that I'm talking about him right now. Dr. Bert Beach, thank you very much. He is, to me, like the Dean of Religious Liberty Advocates, so we are grateful to have you. When Dr. Beach retired, we have Dr. John Graz, who took the mantle, and he is also here with us. So Dr. John Graz, will you please stand? So he was the one who organized the previous IRLA congresses, but he actually allowed me to say this. He deceived us, and let me tell you why. He told us that he would retire. I knew that will never happen because he is now the head of an institute. John, would you please tell us? Let me just take the liberty here to have you come here and tell us what you're doing right now, just to honor you. Please, come on. They don't hear you. Come on here. Obey now, John. Come on. I hope you will be indulgent because I really wanted to recognize John has been so dedicated to IRLA and the Seventh-day Adventist Church as PAL director that I wanted to just mark this moment and thank you for your work over these years, and I will share this elsewhere, but I just wanted to mark this now. But would you tell us what you do right now, because you have not retired, I know. Just a second. Oh, you know what? Let me give you mine here.
I'm surprised because I did not plan to say anything this morning, and you surprised me. Just, we organized several events when I came back to Europe, and we opened, and you were with us, Ganoune, a new center, a center for religious freedom and public affairs on the Adventist campus in Cologne, and we work already closely with the United Nations and, of course, with the IRLA. Thank you very much, Ganoune. Congratulations for this beautiful Congress.
You are most welcome, John. Thank you. Thank you.